The polar vortex disruption that will reshape February is underway. What we're about to witness across the United States represents a fundamental shift in our winter weather pattern. The stratospheric warming event that began in mid-January has effectively shattered the polar vortex, and this breakdown is about to unleash the most sustained Arctic assault we've seen this winter season. This isn't just another cold snap that passes through in 2 or 3 days. We're looking at a pattern change that could lock bitter cold air across much of the eastern United States for weeks. The timing of this Arctic outbreak couldn't be more significant. Latest high-resolution model data reveals a breakdown of the polar circulation, forecast to release Arctic air across North America. This represents the kind of weather pattern that transforms entire regions, affecting everything from energy consumption to agricultural operations to basic human safety across millions of square miles. Understanding what makes this particular Arctic blast different from typical winter cold snaps requires examining the atmospheric mechanics driving it. The polar vortex normally acts as what meteorologists call the keeper of cold, maintaining a tight circulation around the North Pole that locks frigid air in the Arctic regions. When this circulation remains strong and stable, most of the United States experiences relatively moderate winter conditions, with occasional brief incursions of cold air that pass through quickly without establishing persistent patterns. But when the polar vortex becomes disrupted or collapses entirely, as is happening right now, the results are dramatic and far-reaching across continental-scale areas. The destabilization is the primary driver behind the 22I6 Arctic blast forecast, signaling a return to old-school winter conditions that many Americans haven't experienced in several years, particularly those living in regions that rarely see sustained Arctic conditions. The stratospheric warming event that triggered this collapse began in late January and has been steadily weakening the polar circulation through a complex process that occurs high above the Earth's surface. This warming occurs roughly 12 to 30 miles above the Earth's surface in the stratosphere, but its effects propagate downward over the course of several weeks, gradually reorganizing the entire atmospheric circulation pattern across the northern hemisphere. The warming disrupts the normal temperature gradient that maintains the polar vortex's strength, causing it to wobble, weaken, and eventually split apart. The ECMWF ensemble temperature forecast shows this colder pattern, with a stable cold air corridor from southern Canada down into the northern, central, and eastern United States. This corridor represents more than just cold temperatures. It represents a fundamental reorganization of the atmospheric flow pattern across North America. The timeline of this Arctic assault reveals why preparation time is becoming critical across much of the eastern United States. Mid-January marks a significant cold snap predicted to affect most of North America, representing the period most likely to see the peak of polar vortex disruption. But this initial wave is only the beginning of what meteorologists expect to be an extended period of well below normal temperatures. Early February brings a secondary wave, often referred to as a February freeze, expected to hit the eastern U.S. simultaneously. This secondary surge represents the full establishment of the new atmospheric pattern, with Arctic air masses becoming entrenched across regions that typically experience much more moderate winter conditions. The geographic scope of this Arctic outbreak extends far beyond the traditional cold weather regions of the northern United States. While areas like Minnesota, Wisconsin, and northern Michigan are accustomed to sustained periods of sub-zero temperatures, this pattern change will bring dangerous cold much farther south than normal winter conditions typically allow. Below normal temperatures are forecast to continue across much of the eastern U.S. into the beginning of February, but the extent of this cold pattern reaches into regions that rarely experience such conditions. States across the Ohio Valley, Tennessee Valley, and even parts of the Deep South could see temperatures that challenge infrastructure not designed for sustained Arctic conditions. But this is where the danger multiplies exponentially beyond simple discomfort or inconvenience. The duration of this cold outbreak represents its most dangerous characteristic. Brief cold snaps, even severe ones, allow infrastructure and communities to adapt and endure using emergency measures and temporary solutions. Extended periods of Arctic conditions create cumulative stress on power grids, water systems, transportation networks, and human health that can lead to cascading failures. The persistence of the cold pattern is the result of a strong negative phase of the Arctic oscillation, which leads to positive height anomalies at high latitudes. This technical description translates into a weather pattern that becomes self-reinforcing, with high-pressure systems in the Arctic pushing cold air southward repeatedly, rather than allowing it to moderate and retreat northward. Energy infrastructure across the affected regions faces challenges that extend well beyond typical winter demand. Natural gas pipeline systems experience increased pressure and flow requirements when temperatures drop significantly below normal for extended periods. Electrical grid operators must manage not only increased heating demand, but also the reduced efficiency of power generation equipment operating in extreme cold. The human health implications of sustained Arctic conditions create public safety concerns that emergency management officials across multiple states are actively preparing for. When temperatures drop below minus 20 degrees Celsius, standard winter wear is insufficient. Extended exposure to such conditions can lead to frostbite in minutes rather than hours, and hypothermia becomes a risk even for people who believe they're adequately prepared. Transportation systems across the affected regions will face operational challenges that go beyond snow removal and ice treatment. For every 10-degree drop in temperature, tires can lose 1 psi of pressure. When temperatures remain well below zero for days or weeks, vehicle maintenance becomes a daily concern rather than a periodic one. Railway systems experience particular vulnerabilities during extended cold periods. Steel rails contract in extreme cold, creating gaps that can affect train operations. Switch points can freeze, requiring continuous heating to maintain operational capability. Freight rail operations that transport essential goods, including heating fuel, food supplies, and medical equipment, can face significant disruptions. Aviation operations at airports across the affected region will require specialized procedures for extreme cold conditions. Jet fuel must be treated to prevent gelling, and aircraft require extended warm-up periods before flight operations can begin. Ground equipment operates less efficiently in extreme cold, extending turnaround times and reducing airport capacity. The agricultural implications of this sustained Arctic outbreak extend beyond immediate livestock concerns to affect food production and distribution systems across multiple states. Dairy operations require continuous energy for maintaining proper temperatures in milking facilities and milk storage systems. When power systems experience strain or failure during extreme cold periods, agricultural operations can face total production losses. Livestock across the affected regions will require additional feed and energy to maintain body temperature during extended cold periods. Cattle, sheep, and other animals must burn significantly more calories to generate body heat when temperatures remain well below zero for days or weeks. This increased feed requirement strains agricultural supply chains during a period when transportation systems also face operational challenges. Water infrastructure across much of the affected region was not designed for the sustained cold temperatures this Arctic outbreak will bring. Municipal water systems in states that rarely experience sustained sub-zero temperatures often have surface-level infrastructure that becomes vulnerable when exposed to Arctic conditions for extended periods. Private well systems face particular risks during extended cold periods. Wells that function normally during typical winter conditions can freeze when temperatures remain well below zero for days or weeks. The repair and restoration of frozen well systems often requires specialized equipment and techniques that may not be readily available in regions that rarely experience such conditions. The economic implications of this Arctic outbreak extend far beyond immediate heating and energy costs. Businesses across the affected regions will face operational challenges that affect productivity and supply chain reliability. Manufacturing facilities that depend on continuous processes must maintain adequate heating to prevent equipment damage and production shutdowns. Construction and outdoor work activities will face significant restrictions during the most severe portions of this Arctic outbreak. If it is too cold for you to stand outside without a coat for 10 minutes, it is too cold for most outdoor work activities. This restriction affects not only construction projects, but also infrastructure maintenance, utility repairs, and emergency services. Retail and service businesses in areas that rarely experience sustained Arctic conditions often lack the infrastructure and experience necessary to maintain normal operations during extended cold periods. Customers may avoid unnecessary travel, affecting businesses that depend on foot traffic and routine shopping patterns. But perhaps the most concerning aspect of this Arctic outbreak is how it reveals vulnerabilities in systems that most people take for granted during normal winter conditions. Emergency services across the affected regions must prepare for increased demand, while operating under conditions that challenge their normal response capabilities. Ambulance services face increased call volumes for cold-related medical emergencies, while dealing with vehicles and equipment that operate less efficiently in extreme cold. Fire departments must prepare for increased risks of structure fires caused by overtaxed heating systems, improper use of emergency heating equipment, and electrical system failures caused by extreme cold. Response times may be extended due to equipment challenges and hazardous travel conditions. Hospital systems face increased patient loads for cold-related injuries and illnesses, while managing facilities that require additional energy to maintain proper temperatures. Emergency departments must prepare for treating hypothermia, frostbite, and carbon monoxide poisoning cases, while ensuring their own facilities remain operational. The social implications of extended Arctic conditions create challenges for vulnerable populations who may lack adequate heating, appropriate clothing, or access to warming centers during what could be weeks of dangerous conditions. Homeless populations face life-threatening conditions that require coordinated emergency response efforts from multiple agencies working together to provide shelter, food, and medical care. Elderly residents living alone may require welfare checks and assistance with heating system maintenance, as heating systems that normally function adequately may struggle under the continuous demands of extreme cold. School systems across the affected regions must make difficult decisions about continuing operations when bus transportation becomes unsafe, and school buildings struggle to maintain adequate temperatures for extended periods. Extended school closures affect not only education, but also child nutrition programs and child care arrangements for working parents who may face their own work-related challenges during extreme cold periods. Community warming centers become critical infrastructure during extended Arctic conditions, but these facilities require continuous operation. Inadequate supplies to serve populations that may need shelter for days or weeks rather than just overnight accommodation. The coordination between local emergency management agencies, utility companies, and social service organizations becomes essential for maintaining community safety during sustained extreme cold. For individuals and families preparing for this Arctic outbreak, understanding the difference between surviving a brief cold snap and enduring weeks of sustained Arctic conditions becomes critical. Standard winter preparation assumes that extreme conditions will moderate within a few days, allowing for restocking of supplies and restoration of normal services. Extended Arctic conditions require different preparation strategies. Tire pressure checks should occur weekly during an Arctic blast to maintain traction, rather than the monthly or seasonal checks that suffice during normal winter conditions. Vehicle maintenance becomes a continuous concern rather than a periodic one. Home heating systems that operate adequately during normal winter conditions may struggle to maintain comfort when temperatures remain well below zero for extended periods, requiring homeowners to monitor system performance continuously and address issues immediately. Backup heating sources become essential rather than merely convenient during extended Arctic conditions. However, if you lose power, do not use a gas oven or charcoal grill for heat inside your home due to carbon monoxide poisoning risks that increase dramatically during desperate attempts to stay warm. Food storage and supply considerations change dramatically during extended Arctic conditions that may persist for weeks rather than days. Refrigerated and frozen foods may be stored safely outdoors in appropriate containers, but access to grocery stores and supply deliveries may become limited or interrupted for extended periods. Non-perishable food supplies should account for potential supply chain disruptions lasting weeks rather than days, including adequate supplies of medications, pet food, and other essential items that families depend on daily. Water pipe protection becomes a continuous concern rather than a one-time winterization task during extended Arctic conditions. Pipes that remain unfrozen during typical winter weather may freeze when temperatures stay well below zero for days or weeks. Homeowners should know the location of their main water shutoff valve and keep basic pipe repair supplies on hand, as professional plumbers may face high demand and transportation challenges during extreme conditions. This Arctic outbreak represents more than just a weather event. It represents a comprehensive test of infrastructure resilience and community preparedness across regions that rarely face such sustained extreme conditions. The lessons learned from this event will inform future preparation efforts and infrastructure planning decisions across multiple sectors. Additional outbreaks of Arctic air are predicted to continue into at least early February, suggesting that this pattern change represents the establishment of a new atmospheric regime rather than a brief extreme weather event. Understanding this distinction helps communities and individuals prepare appropriately for what may be an extended period of challenging conditions. The meteorological community continues monitoring the evolution of this pattern change using advanced forecasting models, but the fundamental drivers appear well established. The disrupted polar vortex will require time to reorganize and strengthen, meaning that Arctic air masses will continue to have easier access to regions across the eastern United States. Weather forecasting technology provides communities with unprecedented advance warning of dangerous weather conditions. This Arctic outbreak benefits from detailed long-range forecasts that allow individuals, families, businesses, and emergency management agencies to prepare adequately for sustained extreme conditions. The difference between surviving this Arctic outbreak and thriving despite its challenges lies in understanding that extended extreme cold requires different strategies than brief cold snaps. Communities that approach this event with appropriate seriousness while maintaining calm, methodical preparation will emerge stronger. Federal, state, and local emergency management agencies have been coordinating preparation efforts for this Arctic outbreak, drawing on lessons learned from previous extreme cold events, including the February 2021 Texas freeze and other significant Arctic outbreaks. Utility companies across the affected regions have been implementing cold weather operational procedures, including enhanced monitoring of natural gas pipeline systems, electrical grid load management, and coordination with emergency management agencies for priority restoration efforts. Regional differences in infrastructure design and community preparedness mean that the impacts of this Arctic outbreak will vary significantly across the affected area. Northern communities possess infrastructure and institutional knowledge that provides advantages, while southern communities often possess community networks that provide different types of resilience. This Arctic blast demands serious preparation, community coordination, and individual responsibility from everyone in its path across this vast portion of our continent during what may be the most challenging winter cold